Hi, welcome to Off Camber with
Chris and
Corey. Welcome back, everybody. We're a little late on getting this episode out. Admittedly, we were talking about doing an Indy 500 kind of preview episode, and some things led to one thing, led to another. You know, life happens, so everything got kind of pushed back a week. So we're going to do an Indy 500 review episode. So we're going to get that started. So first of all, the news. First part of the news that I seen going forward, since this is a really loose news podcast, we'll say, or loose news section, is we had our the series of USAC races and stuff before the 500, and Hoosier 100's the big one for us. It was back this year. They said last year was going to be the last one. And Chris, who won?
our boy, high, wide, and handsome Kyle Larson, making his comeback, his redemption arc, as I like to call it, after a unfortunate series of events earlier this year. It's good to see him back in victory lane.
Yeah, it's one of those. Hate to see what went down with him, and I truly believe that he is sorry for what he's done, and it's great to see him back on the dirt tracks and just absolutely racking up the wins. Like, wings, no wings, doesn't matter. You put this guy in a sprint car or a midget, he is just golden, man. Like, holy crap, he's so good. So
If
good.
I remember correctly, he hasn't been in a Silver Crown car since 2012. So to hop in and wheel it on one of the toughest Silver Crown tracks, that's impressive.
Yeah, that is really crazy. I wish we had some karting news in here because we're a karting podcast, but it seems like, I know it's been kind of scattered this year. I know we just finished up with SCUSA at Newcastle here in Indiana. They had a series of events. I'm still looking at some results on that. Let's see what we got here. But yeah, it was a pretty big event. I think it might have been like 2 weeks here. I'm not entirely sure. Let me look at the calendar here real quick. But yeah, they just finished up with the Pro Tour. Yeah, they had 2 rounds here. They had rounds 1 2 events. So they had rounds 1 through 3 the first week of August, and then 13th through 16th they had rounds 4 through 6 at Newcastle. So that was really cool to see them coming around here. If you're not familiar, SCUSA is Superkarts USA, and they are the group that runs the Vegas race, the Super Nationals, which is the one we get a lot of international drivers in. So it was really cool to see SCUSA back out here. And from what I gather so far, the only thing I was really privy to in social media is the new Will Power carts were really performing out there. So I apologize that I haven't been up on that news recently, since everything's kind of been a mess. And admittedly, we haven't followed SCUSA that much around here because it's not a Midwestern thing normally. They're kind of West Coast. So, but it was really cool to see them have a couple events here at Newcastle going forward.
I mean, to be honest, it can be argued pretty substantially that Newcastle is one of the premier karting tracks in North America, right?
I've heard some people say it's one of the. At one point, it was one of the best tracks in the world.
I mean, you got to hand it to Mark Dismore. When it came to getting that place paved and waiting for it to cure, he knew what he was doing. So it's good to see SCUSA, headlining a place like that, adding legitimacy to it.
Yeah. It's SCUSA's been there. I know after they first opened, that was where they held, I think, some of the Red Bull driver search that led to Scott Speed getting the ride for Toro Rosso and F1. So they had a round of that there. They've had so much there. I've raced there in club races. I've raced with the Vintage Karting Association. They normally hold the Newcastle Vintage Thunder. I believe that's what it's called now. But they hold that race there, and that's normally at one point in time, that was the biggest crowd of the year. And to be able to race with some of the real past legends of the sport, and it seems like you get new legends each year. Some of the first years I ran, I had the chance to run against the Great Lakes Speed, the only American born driver, I believe, to ever win the senior world championships. I think we've had a junior driver do it now, but only American born driver for a long time to win the world championships, which was really impressive. And he's a NASCAR race winner, so it was cool to be able to drive there with him. And and when he did that, Chris, guess who he beat to win the world championship?
I want to say a guy named Senna.
Yep, a little known driver named Ayrton Senna. Yeah, it was really cool to see him cool to see the history, and he beat Ayrton Senna and a bunch of internationally renowned kart racers to do that. So that was some talent and took some cojones.
and especially considering I know this is getting a little bit technical, but karting overseas versus karting in the States at the time, the technology evolution was a little bit different between the two. So to be able to bridge that gap and to be competitive over there, man, it's truly a talent. We know him for the for his stock car exploits, but it's interesting just the number of American drivers that started out in go-karts and he continued with it.
Yeah, and to this day, from what I understand, he's been driving some shifters and tags down south.
Wow.
So that was cool. I don't know if it was the first year, but maybe the second or third year that I was there, I had the chance to meet, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was Mickey Rupp.
That's from that's the early days of karting, the straight rail days.
Yeah, so Mickey Rupp, for those of you who don't know, has really been instrumental in the karting world. He was one of the first guys to mass produce a go-kart. Like, I think it was his company that was one of the first to mass produce them. So Rupp Karts. But he also he ran the Indy 500 once, I believe, back in the Roadster days. And he finished, I'd like to think he finished top 5. I definitely think it was top 10. And he lost Rookie of the Year honors, unfortunately, to a driver that, really never, I guess he never really amounted to much. His name was Mario Andretti. So, whatever happened to that guy, we don't know.
Yeah. Just kidding. We love you, Mario. You're a hero.
Yeah, Mario, but, you're a national treasure, man. But yeah, he lost Rookie of the Year honors to him because I think he finished like one place in front of him. But it was really cool to meet Mickey Rupp. And I guess the two really neat things about that, even more so than those two guys, I felt like were because this vintage karting events really connects the past with current time. So we're running at Newcastle, which is a very modern track, very modern design with these old go-karts. Dating back to when go-karts first existed in the 50s to I was running a kart that was primarily designed in the late 60s, early 70s. And there's karts now that run all the way up to the late 80s, early 90s. It's such a wide variety and so many different people. But it was really a pleasure to meet. We had two more really important people in the karting world. The first one that was probably the most personal to me, and I really got to talk with them, and really, I really enjoyed every minute, was Faye Pearson. Faye Ladybug Pearson. And Faye, most people will probably not recognize her. Her husband and her were the people who ran Bug Karts. And Bug Karts was around since darn near the beginning. And they were one of the big American brands of karts way back in the day. We'll say, 60s into the 70s. and they still had a presence, I think, into the 90s before they finally shut down or were bought out. But Faye was probably one of the first female racers as she drove. She wasn't just an owner of the company, that she was fierce, fast, and didn't take any BS. And I think one of her big races was winning the Tecate endurance race in Mexico.
Yep.
And to give you an idea of the Tecate endurance race, literally they're running through the streets of Tecate, Mexico, which were cobblestone, dirt, gravel. It's this long endurance race. I forget how many miles it was. It was
Yeah.
ridiculous.
It was like karting's version of the Baja.
Yes, it was karting's version of the Baja, except it was very, they're obviously on a circuit. But it's the closest thing I think that we got to the Baja ever. And she won that. And that takes a lot. There were a lot of great drivers there, and the conditions are very challenging. And it's not run anymore, obviously. But that was really impressive. And to see, to meet somebody that has done that, first of all, is amazing. But the fact that she was a female racer at the time that really defied a lot of expectations, specifically back in the 60s and 70s, was just amazing. And I got to have a really good conversation with her, and that she remembered me. That was cool. But I guess the final karting celebrity that we got to meet there was Duffy Livingston.
Ooh.
Yeah. So once again, if you don't know, Duffy Livingston, oh my God, he is.
If you've got a trophy named after you, you're somebody.
Yeah, the IKF National Championship trophy is called a Duffy, and that was like the governing body in the United States for a long time before the WKA, before SCUSA, before all these other groups came along, AKRA, etc. But he has that trophy named after him. It's just like in drag racing in NHRA, they have the Wallies, I believe, for winning nationals or winning national championships. You get a Wally.
Yep.
Same thing, basically, but the karting version. And he is no longer with us, unfortunately. I believe he passed away just a couple years ago. But he was truly a legend. And Duffy was one of the first men to compete in karting, period. I believe he was on the ground floor when karting was first invented out in California.
First, there was the Rose Bowl.
Yes. So
the
karting,
let there be light moment of karting.
Yeah, karting was invented in Southern California, and the first race was run in the Rose Bowl parking lot back in 55, 56 area, maybe 57,
Yeah, I
somewhere
want
in
to say
there.
56, 57, yeah.
Yeah, but the first race was run in the Rose Bowl parking lot. So, I don't want to sound too, overly American, but you're welcome. The rest of the world is now really taken off with the karting thing. It is huge, but Humble Origins Rose Bowl parking lot, and he was one of the guys on the ground floor of that. Art Ingalls, all these guys.
Yep.
But yeah, had the chance to meet Duffy Livingston, and I have some pictures of him, and my wife even has pictures. Like, she took pictures of him, and I'm like, why'd you take pictures of Duffy? She's like, because it's Duffy freaking Livingston. Touche.
Yeah. But when we talk about go-karts, and those of you who've been around karting or know the industry know this, but the karts these days they grip and handle unlike any other vehicle short of a Formula One car. But the original karts, well, we like to say that their tires were harder than the asphalt they raced on.
Yeah.
And for grown people, their knees back in these days, their knees were still up by the steering wheel and sliding around. And especially with the people who decided to push the envelope and put dual engines, dual carbs on, they were real daredevils. And to see to look at these people in their later years and still see that sparkle in their eye, with that passion for it, even if they can't physically do it anymore, seeing that spirit still lives on in them when you get to meet them It's a magical feeling.
Yeah, it truly is something that I I don't know how you explain it, but to see some of these legends go back out there and run, it's just like when you go to the 500 and you see the vintage cars go around before the race, and they're being driven by past 500 winners, legends. Like when you see Rick Mears driving his car around the track, it's like, oh, but most of the time, these drivers, if they're still able, aren't doing just parade laps. They're out there racing. So it's like if
Yep.
Rick Mears or Alonso Sr. or somebody like that went, to some vintage racing league and was racing their car. And, like their actual car they won the 500 with, or one of them. Like, man, that's crazy. So it it really means a lot to see that. I feel like we get a little more connection there, but that was cool to see that at Newcastle, and that's one of the many events that Newcastle has held through the years. So we're really really fortunate to have them in the karting community, and they've inspired, I think, a lot more tracks to really up their game. Down there in your neck of the woods, Chris, you've got GoPro Motorplex,
Yes, sir.
which has
Oh,
turned into a truly awesome facility from what I have seen online.
yeah,
So
that's where I started my outdoor karting career after doing, warehouse racing for a long time. Because I remember when it was still the old Mooresville Motorplex, and before GoPro came on as a sponsor and really took it to the next level. Interestingly enough, that track was modeled after the Kartdromo Parma in Italy, which was one
oh
of the original Italian kart tracks. I believe Senna raced there. That its heyday was during that generation of the Lake Speed, Terry Fullerton, Ayrton Senna years in the late 70s.
yeah.
And so it was I don't think it had as much elevation change as GoPro does, but that's what it's modeled after. And it's incredible just seeing how that track's evolved over the past couple of years. Seeing names like Fittipaldi having a little kart garage there, and I think coming up USPKS is going to be running there. I want to say in a month or two, but
Yeah.
it's definitely uh while I wouldn't say that it's as expansive. I think it's shorter than uh Newcastle is.
I believe
It
it is.
does, yeah, it does provide its own unique challenges, and that's if you're in the Carolina region and you're looking to get into karting, that's the place to go to just get the lay of the land and see people who've really put their heart and soul into it. You know, watching them perform.
Yeah. And here in Indiana, we're lucky to have Newcastle, which is really a big, wide open track. It's got lots of different configurations. Um, and I guess, if you want to get on the, I guess, bandwagon here in Indiana, which is a good bandwagon to be on, recently we've had the revival of Whiteland Raceway Park, which has been just truly, oh my gosh, a complete 180, amazing turnaround. It's kind of like you're talking about GoPro coming down and taking over, sponsoring the track there and changing it. We're going through that same renaissance now, I feel, with Whiteland.
Yep.
And the backstory on Whiteland is arguably, we say arguably because there's another track that claims also, but arguably the oldest permanent kart track in existence. Um, I believe Adams Kart Track in California opened at almost the exact same time. But the argument, we're kind of on the Whiteland side here, so
That's our old I guess that's our spiritual home track.
yeah.
So,
And
um
but yeah,
yeah,
it's
because I think it opened
truly
58, right?
somewhere in there. It was a long time ago, for way before I was born. I know there's been people who may or may not listen to this are gonna be like, why would that wasn't that long ago? I was alive then. Like, okay, I wasn't though, so it was a long time ago to me. I apologize. Um, but yeah, it was truly really just amazing to see that track's still around, because not many old tracks are around anymore. They get bulldozed over for various projects, but Adams and Whiteland are still going, and in mostly their original configuration. Whiteland went through. They still have the original configuration, or they brought the original configuration back, but they did a big expansion onto the track with like the second or third owner that added a lot of character to it. Whiteland has one banked turn. They now call it the Daytona turn, but it was referred to as the Monza turn or the Whiteland wall at one point.
Yep.
Big banked left-hander. Most of the time it's left-hander. I've taken it right. Yeah, we run it backwards.
Yeah, we've run it backwards in the Grand Prix car. We ran it backwards a couple of times.
Yeah, but big banked corner that really puts the G-forces on the car. Pushes it down to the asphalt, and added some hairpin, and it's got a little bit of elevation change in that area. Not as much.
It's got, I think, coming down from the banking and then down into the hairpin. And then that section back into the inner loop.
Yeah.
That's where the most elevation change is.
When you're walking it, it's like, wow, this is a decent amount of elevation change. When you're in the car, it's like, it's not that much. But yeah, it was unfortunately starting to kind of go downhill as things do. Not a lot of money coming into the facility. It's in close proximity to Indianapolis. It's in close proximity to Newcastle. So admittedly, that was wearing on it. And it just was one of those situations where they couldn't put a lot of money into it to keep it up where they needed it to really keep it at. And it was starting to look pretty grim. The car counts were going down, and it actually got to the point where the ground was about to be sold and it was going to be bulldozed for various projects once again. And it was one of those 11th hour or 12th hour buyers came in and bought the track. And we were lucky with that. We were very lucky.
Absolutely.
And almost instantly, it became the 180 that we're talking about now. And they started to, they wiped the slate clean. They did a bunch of improvements, the improvements that they could get done in a short amount of time to start hosting races. They got the word out. They had some money races. And now it is this consistent crowd. It is constantly building better and better. The facility is getting better and better. The races are running better and better, and it really has transformed from this little historic track to, I'm pretty sure in the next couple of years is going to be one of the premier tracks in North America. I really do think so.
And it's interesting, in the same way that Indianapolis Motor Speedway was designed for a certain type of vehicle, and yet hosts vehicles now more that perform better than the original designers ever could have intended or hoped for. Whiteland was designed for that original generation of go-kart.
Yeah,
and to go into the Monza turn. I run a mid 80s vintage kart and run it, which is similar to the technology we have today, and going into a corner behind one of those rear engine straight rail rock hard tire karts driven by a living legend, and watching them pitch it sideways in the banking is well,
when you pitch
Corey,
a
you
cart
can
sideways
attest to
in the
this.
banking. Yeah, when you pitch a cart sideways in the banking, it's special, and then at the same time it makes you wonder,
Am I okay?
am I okay? Am I going to make it through this? Especially when you do it in front of like a 20 cart field. Don't do that.
Yeah.
I've done that before, and that kind of got scary.
But
But yeah,
Whiteland is one of those tracks that just, regardless of the kart that's running on it, makes it exciting and makes it compelling.
yeah, it really, a lot of people, I've been to many different tracks. I've driven street courses, I've driven dirt ovals, I've driven big tracks, and this is probably my favorite because it's constantly, you're doing something constantly as a driver. In a modern kart, it is constantly turning or something. And they've added more configurations now this year. and it really makes the track different. Like there's elements of the track that are very familiar. You obviously turn one, most of the time you're going through some either forwards or backwards, and you're used to that. But then they can cut through the infield, do all kinds of fun stuff, and it really, really makes you think about it. And it's constantly doing something, and I love that about it. Keeps you very involved. And I like they did the additions this year where they have now repaved and added the original pieces of track section back from the 50s that had since grown over and been tilled up. So that has all been added back in, and they use that as cut throughs and various track configurations. Recently, they just resealed the whole track again because they did some repaving in the off season, obviously, to some of the regular corners on the long track, is what we call it, and they just resealed the track again. Last year, I think, or the first full year that the new owners came in, they tore down the old clubhouse and put a fully modernized clubhouse and bathrooms and everything in, and they just were finishing up their rolling dyno. They have a rolling dyno there.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is new.
Yeah, they got a dyno. They've got full rental cart fleet, all that. They added garages, so you now have permanent on-site garages you can rent. This year they just got permanent fuel barrels put in with pumps. So that's really exciting. And it's just been building and building. And I've heard some things through the pipeline, possibilities. I can't talk about them because it's a surprise, hopefully. But I've heard some big things coming in the near future that are very, very promising. Very, very promising, guys and gals. But and I guess that leads to the owners who bought it. For those of you IndyCar people out there and people in the know, the two people who are in charge of the track now are none other than Sarah Fisher and her husband Andy O'Gara. And I just can't thank them enough for rescuing this and bringing it back and just doing a freaking super job with it. So
Yeah, absolutely. Hats off to them because they have the passion for it. And they're committed to honoring its history and doing it right. Yeah,
yes,
which is more than we could ever ask for. That was when that news came out. Wow, that must have been what, a year or two ago now,
yeah.
when they first did that. That when you think of what the best case scenario was, that beat what I thought the best case scenario could be by a country
Oh,
mile.
yeah. Well, we were running the Grand Prix Fall Series, and we were in charge of the series, and we were seriously like when we got the news that the track was up for sale, and that it was the possible buyers were going to close on it within a week and shut it down. It was, what do we do? We still have half the series to run, so we were scrambling to find places to finish the series at. It was just and we just couldn't believe it. Like, wow, it actually finally happened. And luckily, Sarah and Andy came in and invested a lot of money in this facility. And they're crazy enough to do that because anyone who invests that much in karting or in motorsports is truly insane because it has been said many times. There's two quotes I've heard. Somebody asks, "Is there any money in racing?" And
Only what you take with you.
well, yeah, our old boss once said, "Yeah, there's money in racing. I'm sure there is because I put a bunch of money into it, so it has to go somewhere." And then the other quote is, "How do you make a small fortune in racing?"
Start with a big fortune.
Yep, start with a large one. And it's literally like lighting money on fire, people. So you get more replayability out of an Xbox, admittedly, but this is what we do, and it's nothing can replace it. Nothing.
Absolutely.
But so moving on from that, hopefully, like I said, I've heard some big things in the pipeline, hopefully for Whiteland, and hopefully we can report on that when they become official. And I will hopefully be there. Oh, in September, I think we're going to be doing the Vintage Kart Association Hoosier Vintage Nationals there. So hopefully we'll be there. Hopefully I can put together a ride for that. That's always fun. So hopefully see some fun racing there that weekend. So anything else in the news? Is there any other motorsports news going?
Not that I know off the top of my head.
Oh, I guess all but Ferrari have dropped their appeal of Racing Point's legality issues in F1. So if going forward, the Ferrari right now is the only one really going after Racing Point for their car issues. So Racing Point got in trouble. If you've been watching F1 at all this year, or even if you're not, Racing Point basically rolled out for the first test this year with their car, and their car is almost an exact copy of last year's Mercedes. Like visually,
Which, I mean,
there's not much.
If you're gonna copy it, that's the right one to copy.
Yeah, and the FIA visited their facility, and they explained the car, and they deemed the car legal. Okay, there was enough difference in it, they deemed it legal. But apparently, initially, it was Renault protested them over their brake ducts. The brake ducts on the cars were eerily similar to the Mercedes of last year. And as it turns out, they are basically the brake ducts off the Mercedes last year. And a lot of people speculated that maybe they got some help from Mercedes on this because they're running Mercedes engines. As it turns out, they did. Mercedes gave them their CAD files from the previous year, since they moved on to new designs, and they basically just copy paste onto their car. So they are in effect running last year's Mercedes brake ducts on last year's Mercedes car. So and there are differences in it when you start to look at it. They've done some things just enough to call it their own, but it's still a Mercedes, guys. So Renault has been very ferocious about it, and then McLaren got in on it, and basically almost all the grids like, hey, you can't do that, not to that level anymore. And it finally got to the point when they signed the Concord Agreement, the 2021 regulations and whatnot, because they're going to change the cars dramatically. Most of the teams backed down and said, whatever, we don't care. Except Ferrari. Ferrari's the only one still in the battle right now, so we'll see if they back out in the coming days. But lesson for all you kids out there, do your own homework. It's very important.
Yes.
Especially in the day and age of no customer cars in F1. So yeah, that's probably about it for the news. So we're going to move on to our main topic, which this week is the Indy 500 special. I could always sing Back Home Again in Indiana for you, but I'm not really certified to do that. So welcome back home for the Indy 500 for this week's Indy 500 special. So obviously,
Cue Delta Force theme.
Yes, the Delta Force theme. We can't sing it on here because it's copyrighted. So just imagine if you know what the Delta Force theme is in the old Indy 500 intro with Paul Page. Every year, 33 drivers set forth.
It's like for 500 miles.
For 500 miles.
And an old cup and a bottle of milk.
An antique silver cup and a bottle of milk. Yep. We love to do that. So, back home again and Indy. That's as far as I go. So this year was the 104th running. It was unfortunately odd because there were no fans in the stands. We've talked about this. It's been covered in the media. A lot of people have been, pining about that, and it was odd. Watching it on TV, it was definitely odd and kind of took away from it because the fans are really the driving force behind this. But nevertheless, the race went on. We're happy for that. We got our race, and it was a really good race.
Yeah. Yeah, it was even with the aero screen, adding weight to the car, adding a little bit of drag, just albeit in a different place. There was still enough overtaking for it to feel like one of the 500s that we've seen in recent years with the with so much of the dueling that we've come to love.
I feel like it was a really good mesh of the previous Dallara and the DW12, if you think about it. With the when they first brought out the new with the new Universal Aero kit, passing was at a definite premium, and that was a tough race. It was a track position race. Last year, the race there was a lot more passing. Like a lot of teams got aero stuff figured out. I'd like to say the engines were a little closer. We had that really good duel at the end, so I feel like they just figured out a lot more from the first year. And then you throw the aero screen at everyone, and that's like whoa, 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 whoa. Heavier. There is more drag to it. They've got to manage temperatures in the cockpit, and I feel like this year was not quite what we had with the DW12, where it was, no one wants to lead, and then it leapfrogs the whole time. One car leads, switching it back and forth. But it wasn't quite what we had with the old Dallara, where you would get one or two cars out the whole race way out front, and then there'd be some dueling in the mid pack, and then it'd be fuel mileage at the end. I felt like it was a good mix in between those.
Yeah, and it did put an emphasis on more decisive passing, which is why you saw the master of decisive passing, Takuma Sato, come to the front when it came time to make the make difficult moves where the person's going to defend, the person you're overtaking is going to defend, and the slipstream isn't as effective as it was in the previous generation aero kit. And timing is everything. Corey, we talked about this before the race, and I predicted that whenever passing is at a premium and you have to call your shot and then make it or absolutely lose it, Takuma Sato is the man you go with.
Yeah,
And it was
I
good to
called.
see him get his second second win.
Yeah, I called Scott Dixon on that one, and it was looking like Dixon forever. He did his typical. We're gonna say typical 500 because he leads a lot in the 500. Geez, I mean, almost everyone except for a few years ago when he had his really bad wreck. But most of the previous generation Dallara chassis, you'd see the Ganassi guys up front leading most of the race, and then something odd would happen at the end, and they wouldn't necessarily be up there. And with the DW12, they led quite a bit, but there was a lot more leapfrogging, obviously, with the drag on the kit and the draft you got from that. So I was expecting to see Dixon up there. His 2020 has just been phenomenal. And Ganassi's 2020 has been phenomenal. They won. Looking back at this, they won the first
They won
4 races.
Texas. Yeah, I want to say Texas.
Yeah, so they won Texas, they won the Grand Prix of Indy, and they won
Road America race 1.
Both Road America races.
No, I was thinking Dixon. Ganassi as a whole did win. Yeah, both of them.
So they won the first 4 races. Dixon won the first 3. Rosenquist won the 4th. And then you had Penske come in with Pagenaud at Iowa on the first race. And then you had Newgarden in the second race doing his thing because he's really dominant there. But then, the race that really matters, the race that needed the bold passing, and a few people were predicting, the bold moves were going to be the thing that's going to shine this year. Sato rose to the top. He did his thing.
No attack, no chance.
No attack, no chance. And you know what? I'm really happy for him. I'm really happy to see Sato, 43 years old, defying the laws of everything. Defying everything right now. Everyone says, you can't be that old and be in one of your top forms of motorsports. Well, he is, and he's a 2-time Indy 500 winner. It was truly, it's a magical time to see this, and man, that guy is so committed. And it was a great duel with him and Dixon, and man, it was something else. And he absolutely drove the race he needed to drive.
Yep.
And Dixon, I think we're both in agreement here that Dixon was just too conservative.
Yeah, I think Dixon. I Dixon mentioned that he thought Sato didn't have the proper enough fuel to finish, and we know that Sato was pulling some Michael Schumacher level car adjustment between corners in terms of leaning out the fuel mixture in the short chutes and everything. So perhaps they snookered Dixon into thinking that he could lay back and then charge within the last 5 laps. But Sato did what most of us would do if we've got a shot to win the Indy 500, and that's go for the gap, go for the win, and stay in it till the checkered flag falls or something else happens.
Yeah, I heard it referred to by we can call him IndyCar YouTuber, IndyCar analysis, David Land. And David, credit to you on this. You listening to you guys and your rundown of the 500, he really phrased it the best. I don't think I could do this any better. Dixon drove this like a NASCAR race, expecting fuel mileage and green white checkers at the end, and Sato drove it like it was the Indy 500. And all credit to David Land and his guys on that. But that was really the best way I could, as soon as I heard them, like, yep, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. So
yeah, Scott. I think Scott Dixon drove it like someone who has 5 championships,
yeah,
and Sato drove it like someone who has 5 wins, and each of them means something. And that's not to say Scott Dixon, didn't have fire in the belly over it, as my mom would put it. But I think Sato had that little bit of you never know if this is gonna be the last one. Let's go for it.
yeah. He's driving, I guess, driving like a man possessed.
Yep.
With these, and I really think going forward, if anyone really bets against Sato going into the 500, that's silly. Because he's been competitive. Him going for it against Dario when he was with Ray Hall the first time was bold. He kind of came out of nowhere and did that, but he made a statement. And since then, he's been able to consistently challenge at a bunch of tracks. And at the 500 particularly, now the last 2 or 3 years, 2 to 4 years, because he won his first one with Andretti, and obviously he was able to outduel Elio. I think he was outdueling at the end.
I can double check that. I believe you're right.
I believe it was Elio because it was the last year of the manufacturer Aero kit.
Manufacturer, yeah.
So yeah, he was outdueling Elio at the end of that race, and Elio is definitely no slouch there. So that was really cool to see that. I'm like, okay, yeah, this guy's got his chops, and you shouldn't write him off at the 500. And then last year, I felt like he might have been too conservative in the end of the race, because if you remember looking at the cars last year, you had your Rossi and Pagano battle, but who was back there in third place and really close?
Sato.
Mr. Sato. And I was like, man, if these guys slip up, or if he just got on a little bit more, could just dig down and find something, he's right there. He is right there. And I heard some reporters say that maybe he did play a little more conservative last year, and that this year was, like, okay, I'm going out there and I'm doing this. And he qualified. He qualified third, and Dixon qualified second. So Sato obviously had speed. The Hondas were just so dominant. Period. But man, that was something to see him go up there. He led 27 laps on the day, according to the lap chart, compared to Dixon's 111. But there's only one.
That puts Dixon in the top. I want to say that puts him in the top 10, if not the top 5 for laps led at Indy.
Probably, yeah. But as we say in racing, there's only one lap that matters for you to lead. And Rossi is obviously, well, I guess no, Rossi led a couple more laps, but the late Dan Weldon can probably attest to that. There's only one lap that matters in the end, and that's the final lap, the checkered flag. And you can lead all the laps as long as you lead that last lap. And Sato really started, he did a great, they had a great race car for him. They had a great strategy, and for him to come through in the end and really battle it out and just legitimately overtake Dixon for the win. That was really cool. I guess we got to talk about the, with all the cool things that happened there, we got to talk about the elephant in the room of the controversy of the finish.
That's controversy in quotation marks.
Yes, controversy in quotation marks. There was a lot of, I'm on Twitter, and there was so much hatred for the finish of the race. With it finishing under yellow for Spencer Pickett's crash into the attenuator. That was only
I'm glad he's okay after that. First of all,
he was released from. They took him to Infield Care Center, and then they went ahead and took him to, I believe it was the hospital or Methodist there in Indy for further observation. But they released him that night, so he's okay, and we're really happy to see that. And the car honestly held up really well.
Yeah.
Because in previous generations, the car would have, with that kind of hit, would have split in two. And that could have been really scary, but it did not, and it was really good to see that he's okay. But we'll get back to the incidents section here in a little bit. But first, the fact that the race finished under yellow. This has been covered by a few people, but I don't think it's a controversial item. I thought at the time maybe they'll throw a red because they've done that. They did that. Was that 2014? I think when Ryan Hunter-Reay won.
Yeah, 14.
They did it in I forget how many laps to go, but Townsend Bell spun the car and speared it into the safer barrier and poked a hole in the steel part of the safer barrier on the outer wall, so they had to re-weld a plate in because it was not safe to run as is, and they had to replace some of the foam. So IndyCar, they figured out how long it was going to take to fix it, so they red flagged the race, brought the cars down pit road, stopped them, fixed it, and then gave a shootout at the end. And that was a good move. I admit, I think that was a good move for the time because it was very exciting in the end. But it was not a precedent that should be set or should be looked back on, because traditionally Indy 500s, a lot of them, quite a few of them have finished under yellow. It's just the nature of the beast.
I mean, Dario in 2012, Tony Kanaan, I want to say 2013. It's, and you didn't really hear much argument then.
So,
historically, that's just been, some races will end in a barn burner, and some of them will end under caution. That's just racing. It's organic.
So we're going back. My first year going to the race was 2010. That ended, I believe, under yellow because of Mike Conway's crash. Because if it had stayed green, Dario was going to run out of fuel, I believe, and Weldon would have not run out of fuel in the Panther racing entry. 2011 did end under yellow, albeit they were kind of racing to the flag. With the way it went down with Hildebrand hitting the wall and Weldon passing him. So that finished under yellow, even though it was not like a pace lap yellow. It was just, yellow flag out. 2012, when Dario won again, you said that was yellow? Yeah.
Yeah, because Sato spun.
Yeah, Sato. Yeah. So 2012 was yellow flag. 2013, that was Kanaan. That was yellow. 2014 was the red flag year, but they finished it on green. 2015, was that the first year of the new aero kits?
Yeah, 2015 was the first year of the manufacturer aero kits because that's
That
the
was
year
green.
where they were having issues with them with the Chevys flipping.
Yeah, flipping. That one finished under green, I believe, because that was the duel between Montoya and Power at the end.
Yep.
Um, and then we had 2016, which was the 100th. And that one finished green, albeit even though the speed that Rossi was moving across the line, you could have sworn it was yellow.
Hey, a win's a win.
Yeah. 2017, that finished, I believe that finished under green. 2018 was green. 2019 was green. So yeah, this is the first yellow flag in a few years. But there was a stretch there, and going back, there's been lots of yellow flags. I mean, we've had the race finish because it just got past the halfway point and it rained. That was Buddy Rice, I believe. I mean,
That was Ray Hall's last win as an owner up until this year.
Yeah, that was his first and his last win up until this year. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think. But yeah, that was Buddy Rice, and then it finished in the rain for Dario's first one, I believe. So there's been all kinds of situations, but yellow flag, the race finishing under yellow was nothing new. There's no precedent for them to throw a red flag all the time. That was really a one-time event, and they really wanted to set it up for a good run at the end because they'd had that run of yellow flags at the end for a long time. And it kind of leaves a bad taste in the fans' mouths, but it is what it is, and I think they made the right call back in 2014 to set up for that. This year, I feel like they made the right call, because it was reported that that attenuator was going to take an hour to put back together. The race has been, the start time's been bumped back by going to NBC, and it's been bumped back through the years. So Indy doesn't have lights. The shadows were starting to cast over the speedway. It was going to get dark. You're on prime time, so you don't have a huge slot of TV to fit into. And when you don't have fans there, you've got virtually nothing to fill that dead space on TV. So with 5 laps to go, an hour repair for 5 laps, and then has been reported trying to get the tires up to temperature. Really, you would be setting up for a 1 to 2 lap shootout, to be honest. Because once you go
if
back to
that,
yellow, yeah,
if that, because I
you go to the
mean,
green
I
and the
don't
white at
think,
the same time.
yeah,
But yeah, I think it was the right decision, and something that I've learned from racing personally is anytime that there are safety vehicles on pit lane, which there were safety vehicles there on pit lane, and because they were trying to clean up the attenuator, you can't bring cars down pit lane. They've got to stay out.
yep.
Anytime there's a safety vehicle there, because you do not want all those cars right there. And while there was a somewhat safe way for them to get through on the front stretch there, they had to go amongst them. Normally, the rule is anytime there's a safety vehicle in pit lane, it's closed. You can't come to pit lane, and you've got to bring the cars back down to the pits and stop them, and restart them with the starters. So it was a mess waiting to happen, and I feel like they made the right call.
I wholeheartedly agree. I think that maybe some of those things on their own would have still allowed them to bring out a red flag. It depends, but I think for sure all those reasons combined, it was more than enough for them to just say, you know what, we've run 195 laps. And as we know, Indy cars do not like being shut off and then turned back on again. They're
No.
very much like like jet fighters and rocket ships in that way. That
Yeah.
it's an elaborate it's an elaborate set of steps.
Yeah.
So I think all that was just and I know it sounds like I'm justifying this, but just beyond a shadow of a doubt, I think it was just the perfect storm where throwing a red flag would have not been feasible.
Yeah.
And while I understand people being upset, I really am irked by just the amount of people questioning the legitimacy of Sato's win.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I think if you would have red flagged it and then went with like a 1 lap shootout, yeah, I think that would have been a lot cheaper of a win, because if you made it through that lap without everyone crashing, or a big crash, because when you're talking about that situation, how many cars do you have going into turn one thinking they have a chance for the win at that point?
Yep. It's better
And
psychology.
I've been in that situation on dirt ovals where they'll restart it with like one lap to go, and it is just crazy. You lose half the field in turn one or something. And you can't do that with Indy cars. It's
Nope.
not Talladega with NASCAR races or Daytona. You really can't risk that with Indy cars, because even with the aero screen and the halo they have tucked underneath there, it's not safe.
No.
So I think they did everything within their power, and they did this, the best, safest finish to that race. And we had a heck of a duel. We can't complain about that. So, it is what it is. And to the haters out there, sorry, I guess. But it happened that way.
Yeah.
So I guess moving forward, let's talk about the incidents in the race. Looking down the
Oh
list,
boy.
33rd position, we had James Davison with probably the most exciting moment of the day. Like, there was a lot of incidents. Like, I'm looking like 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9 incidents, really. Like 9 drivers who fell victim to contact of some sort, or mechanical. So James Davison was the one mechanical failure of the day. And that was crazy. The fire on his right front. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I think what they're saying is that it's a master cylinder failure.
I read
In
that there
the
was a crimp in the brake line. That side, something happened. There was a crimp, and that was the right front was locked partially in place. The pads were locked in, so he had no brakes, and it was just generating massive amount of friction right there. And I have heard stories. So there was a customer of mine who had been on a crew for Schmidt back in, I'd like to say, he was on the crew back with Michaela Lotion when he was there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That was right. That was right when I got introduced to that team. Yeah.
yeah, so he was on the crew with Michaela Lotion, and they were at that was when they first started going back to Gateway, I think. And
I think
they
that.
were
Yeah, that sounds right.
yeah, they were at Gateway. It might have been the year before that, but they were at Gateway, and they had a relatively new crew on one of the cars. Like, they had some newer guys, and he and one other guy were the new guys, and they were both like in charge of a corner of the car. And the other guy was, I think he was a right front guy, and he was in charge of brakes and whatnot. And they went out, and I think might have been qualifying. I'm pretty sure it was practice, but yeah, they went out, and they were looking at the temperature readings on the tires, and the right front was just incredibly hot compared to the others. And they thought, well, maybe there's something with the track, because Gateway is actually pretty hard on tires. With just the angle of it, the speed you're taking through the corners. So they came in, and there was a lot of heat there, a lot of friction. They weren't getting the times they wanted, and they took the wheel off. And sure enough, the guy who was in charge of that, who was a relatively new guy, when he was putting the brake pads in, they measure the brake pads so precisely that they label them. They're supposed to label them for which side of the caliper they're supposed to go on, or which side of the disc, left or right. And he swapped them. So, the right side pad was on the left side of the disc and whatnot. And there was enough of a difference that it created enough friction and heat right there. And it might have been in qualifying. They just missed the mark in qualifying. And this guy said he got taken aside and talked to. And, they were pretty much done for the day. So he comes back the next day, and the guy's gone. His toolbox is gone. And they asked, where'd he go? And he's like, he's on a flight back to Indy. He's like, what do you mean? He's like, well, he's done with his team. So I can imagine there was some issue there, but yeah, it sounds like the brakes were rubbing, and that caused the fire and put the it was, I believe, they're magnesium wheels, but yeah, caused it to go past its boiling point and poof, big fire. Chris,
Yeah,
you have
because
anything to add to that?
yeah, because from I did a project on brake fluid boiling from my senior year at Purdue, and yeah, I can't remember the exact temperatures that they generate, but it's it's more once that fluid boils and once it escapes the caliper, once it escapes the line, I mean it's more than enough to cause a flash fire. It basically acts like oil at that point. It will ignite. And
Well,
as you can see from the if you were looking at close to the wheel actually broke. You
yeah.
know.
Well, what they said was actually the brakes got hot enough to put the magnesium past its point of boiling. And that's what, the brakes got hot enough and the wheel caught fire itself.
Yep.
So, yeah, magnesium, ladies and gentlemen, obviously a great way to get a fire starter kit. You can see
Yeah.
them in mini survival kits. They used to make the gearboxes out of magnesium back in the day, and I heard a guy uh, who worked on restoring. He works on restoring vintage Indy cars. They refer to the gearboxes as the igniters. So when you spin on a rear-engine car at the speedway and you back it into the wall, he's like, well, the igniter is going to go off,
Hey,
and
Corey.
yeah,
Corey. Actually, they're made of aluminum alloy.
the wheels are.
Yeah, apparently.
Oh, they were saying
So, 'cause
magnesium in the broadcast.
yeah, they did back in the Champ Car days, but they were um magnesium because you could remember from Michigan when they'd rub the wall on the backstretch in Michigan, you'd see that flash fire. But according to what I've just searched, it's an aluminum alloy because I think
Okay,
that was enough of a concern going into the 21st century that they decided to.
okay, okay. Well, nevertheless, sorry about that,
Yeah.
folks. My mistake. I'm not an engineer. I was a music major at one point in time, so there you go. But no. Okay, so they weren't magnesium, but the gearboxes used to be magnesium, and they were igniters. And with the bad fuel tank technology they had back in the day before fuel cells, yeah, that's how you got most of your fires at the speedway. So, yep, okay. So brake fluid boiled, everything went all really bad. It went in fuego.
Se quema. Anyways, but so that was James Davison, which I think he's the winner of the "If You Can't Be Fast, Be Spectacular" award.
Exactly.
Um, and let's see, because I think there's one of those fires each year at Indy. Just one of the between Colton last year and Connor Daly a couple of years ago.
Veach,
There's
I think Veach had a
yeah
fire last year
yeah yeah
coming out of the pits, a fuel fire.
yeah that's right. Oh, interesting thing about fueling. I think it was Hinchcliffe. I think um, when they sprayed the water to dilute the fuel, after fueling to
Hmm.
dilute it, as it's running down the bodywork. Apparently, that tripped one of the sensors that told the onboard computer that there's a fuel issue and put the car into limp mode. So they had to completely do a hard reset on the car in pit lane.
Okay, yeah, I
Um,
remember he kind of stalled out there, but he was able to make his way back to seventh place. So he was the highest finishing Andretti car, which was
yep.
kind of surprising that the Andretti's seventh was the highest they finished, considering they are really one of the cars to have at the 500. So, um, yeah, yeah, yeah. Marco didn't even lead a single lap, which is unfortunate. Um, but yeah, going forward, 32nd, and That was Marcus Ericsson. He had big contact. I believe that was 1 and 2 to the short shoot, I think.
Erickson, yeah, I believe so. I think most of the incidents were on the south end of the track.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
Kellett had contact. Dalton Kellett.
That he was in turn 3 because I don't think he had contact. I think he was trying to overtake Ben Hanley and went for a late move and just missed his apex.
Well, they said he only got 82 laps in right here, and it said contact. So
His contact with the wall. I'll tell you that much.
yeah, he had a wreck. So then the big incident, the first big incident, we had, there were several, like there was a alarming number of wrecks this year, but the big incident that was a 2-car deal was the Connor Daly Oliver Askew coming to the green. Connor Daly was coming out of 4 and hit the rumble strip and came back down. The car got light and he spun it. It was pretty spectacular to watch because you could tell he had his foot on the gas the whole time because the rear wheels are just spinning and smoke's going up in the air. And it looked like he was doing this big donut. And he spun and was coming to the inside wall, and then Askew came into the smoke and just misjudged it, I think. Car's packed up, he's seen the smoke. I think he panicked a little because this is his first start and looped it and just smacked the inside wall right before pit lane. Just absolutely pancaked it. And ended up hitting Daly's car. And I thought that was going to be an attenuator incident.
Yeah, to be honest.
But they were okay. That was really good to see. Alex Palou, once again, one of those just, I think he went too high through the corner or lost control and smacked the wall, which it happened to a lot of people, not just rookies, but it's a rookie thing.
Well, with this aero kit, even back to when it debuted in 2018, we see a lot of that mid-corner car just steps out and you can't catch it, versus with the Dallara, I guess by the end it was like the IR11, the old Dallara, or the manufacturer aero kits where you had enough downforce that if the car stepped, you could save it within reason. But these, it just seems like the rear end steps out on you, and it does what you'd expect an open wheel car to do. It snaps.
What I have heard, and from what I've talked to some people, and seen from the drivers and from the teams, is so we don't have much aero going on top of the car anymore, not like the manufacturer kits. And what they did is they shifted all the aero to the bottom of the car, the tunnels. If you look, they've got ginormous tunnels underneath these cars for the ground effect.
And Venturis do not work sideways.
No. So a quick lesson in ground effect. Not going to explain how all it works, but when the car steps out a little bit, when you start to lose that downforce and the mechanical grip, and as soon as you start to go sideways, even a centimeter, you lose the downforce on the car completely. It lifts the car up off and you just spin. You just lose it. And the rule that they tell most drivers is when you're in that spin, just lock the wheel. Like if you're turning left, lock the wheel left. Do not try and catch it. Especially when you're in a high ground effect downforce car, because if you do catch it and you start to turn back to the right, as soon as it catches, it's going to turn hard the direction that you're turning. So even if you do a little catch, and as soon as if you do catch it, turns back to the right, you're going straight into the wall.
Yep, that's what we saw with Bourdais a couple years ago in qualifying.
Unfortunately, the first incident of that at the Speedway that made it prevalent, I think, was Gordon Smiley's crash.
Yep.
Yeah, that was when ground effect was really first coming into Indy, and it was really radical. And Smiley lost it coming out of the corner and overcorrected, and unfortunately he's no longer with us because of that. But it's horrible, and that's just one of the things with open wheel cars, really specifically with a lot of these high speed open wheel cars, is the ground effect. And that's something with these cars is once you start to lose that grip, it's just gone. Compared to the manufacturer kits where the tunnels underneath the cars were pretty small. And they actually had, if I remember right, they still had the domed floor pan.
Yep.
To help prevent the cars from going over because they were having the problem with the cars going over. And that started, I think, on the DW12 Aero kit.
Yep.
They domed the floor pan.
Yeah, because especially in 15 when they had the manufacturer kits, like I mentioned earlier, because that was the first year I was at the Speedway. I remember I was actually that's where I met David, and we were standing in turn 3, looking at when they had the smooth fairing versus the kick-up ramps, and that difference was enough to make the Chevy cars, as soon as they stepped out, flip over like a leaf. I remember being in turn 1 watching Newgarden go over during his wreck. And
Yeah.
it was a epidemic of that sort of rack, so I think that's why they added that feature.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. I think we were driving into the Speedway to watch qualifying when Carpenter flipped, and they had that big like 3-hour pause on qualifying. So yeah, they had that big 3-hour pause on qualifying, and it was the first year I took my mom to the Speedway, and she's like, "Why is it taking so long?" I'm like, this has never happened before that I know of.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely. When the car gets sideways and just starts to spin, it's just gone. And with this Aero kit, the way it works, it really is, old school IndyCar. To be honest, it acts like the old school Indy cars did. So for better or for worse, but thank goodness we have more foot protection now than we used to.
Yeah. 1992 was not a good year.
Yeah. But so um skipping forward one, and we'll come back to this guy, but Ed Carpenter had contact early on with Zach Veach. Veach looked like Veach squeezed him. Carpenter, I think, claimed on the radio that he's pretty sure Veach seen him, but we'll probably never know. But it looked like Veach
And
squeezed him into the short chute wall.
and honestly, that's almost a hallmark of modern Indy 500.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, Veach squeezed him into the wall. It looked like, and so that they were trying to fix that car in the pits for a long time. So yeah, Ed got squeezed. Things happened there. Um, going back, Rossi was one of the big contenders. Rossi really, you know, got himself in trouble a little bit, or a lot bit there. So I would say as a little kid, yeah. Had the penalty on pit lane for avoidable contact. And that, I agree with the penalty. I think they released him a little bit before Sato got out of the box, but he could have got on the brakes. He could have tried to avoid Sato. And as it was said on David Land's show, once again, we're citing David Land, but David, if you ever listen to this, you're a great news source. We're here for bench racing. You're here for news because you're amazing at that. So, and the inside story. So, thank you. I'm going to cite you a few times. But he was talking about with some of his buddies who are pro drivers that IndyCar is trying to implements a zero contact policy in the pits. Like any contact, you get penalized because they don't want anyone getting hurt in the pits. So from that standpoint, I do agree with that. Even though nobody got hurt, there's the potential if somebody bounces off another car and bouncing into somebody's pit box. So I do agree with that.
Yeah.
But that got him in trouble because we had Rossi drive angry. I would say this is 2.0 or 3.0.
Yeah, Rossi driving angry might be the most exciting part of IndyCar. Some
Yeah.
years, because he's one of those people where you talk about an otherworldly amount of car control. He's got it in spades.
Yeah.
Where someone like Dixon is just almost robotically consistent, and someone like Sato has quick hands and is spectacular. Alexander Rossi is the perfect melding of those two types of driving. You know,
Yeah,
precise, but can hang it out when he needs to.
yeah. We seen the first year they brought in the Universal Aero Drive Angry 1 or Part 1, and he's driving around the outside of a bunch of people. It's just like it's terrifying, but also awesome to watch. Like, okay, that's not a normal thing you do at Indy. Last year, after his pit lane fueling incident, we had Rossi driving Drive Angry Part 2 or 2.0, and him trying to make his way back up to get to Pagano, and it almost worked. And then this year we had Part 3 of Drive Angry, and that ended in tears for him. I don't want to say tears, but he was very angry after that because he ended up in the wall, much like other drivers had done throughout the day. Fell victim to the same issues, the same mistakes, getting a little loose and then losing it coming off the corner. That was coming off of turn 2 onto the backstretch, I believe, or coming into 2 and through 2. So that took him out really late in the running. It was a shame that we didn't see the three-way battle, but it was one of those you kind of felt like it was coming. I feel like he's gotten away with so much with Drive Angry. Now, finally, it came back to bite him. So that happened and took him out of the running. And then the final, I guess, sort of incident, we had Pagano get into, I forget who Pagano got into, but had to come in for a front wing change. So he led 14 laps, I think it says here, but he finished down in 22nd. But the final incident was the big one at the end with Spencer Pigot spinning coming off of turn 4 and just absolutely nailing that attenuator on the end of pit lane with just so much force. And we are very lucky and that he is okay. We're very lucky, honestly, I think, that he survived that, because we've seen lesser crashes absolutely just devastate us. And it was really good to see him up and out of there. And I don't want to speculate too much, but I believe probably what they were most concerned about, besides was bruising and probably concussion protocol.
Yeah.
Because I believe I read something today that he was saying that he doesn't remember much of that.
Yeah.
So that leads me to believe that he took a good bump on the noggin, which doesn't surprise me at all with that.
Another thing they were saying was with the aero screen, just because of the way he impacted that attenuator almost perfectly in line with his head. So I shudder to imagine what would have happened if the aero screen hadn't been there to keep the attenuator material from coming over the side of the cockpit into the had we had the same type of open cockpit we've had in previous years.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and look at the video. It's one of those, I would agree with that, and we've had some close calls. The Iowa race, I believe, the Colton Herta incident there was definitely an interesting test of it. So yeah, I don't feel like we've had the major test of it yet, and I hope we don't have to have a major test of it yet, to be honest. But from what I've seen so far, it is a positive. If there's one negative I think I'd take away from it is the weight, the drag, but that's not really negative. The negative is probably how slow it is to get the drivers out of the cars.
Yeah.
Because trying to unhook the helmet now with all the hoses, it's not really a quick disconnect. I was really concerned in Davison's fire, like, is he going to get out in time? Like, I don't know, but he was able to get out. They were able to get it under control. I think that aero screen, in cooperation with the current, the safety team, once they get the hang of everything, it's really the duo of that is really going to really help drivers. tremendously. With the IndyCar safety team, who really is second to none. So, hats off to them, hats off to the aero screen. But we are very lucky that Piggott was okay from that, because that was a nasty looking crash, and it was just really a broadside into a fairly sharp object, you could say. And the fact that it didn't penetrate the cockpit, he didn't get on his head, a number of things. It was the best possible outcome to a bad situation.
Yeah. I think it
So
validates everything that they've done design-wise with the cockpit, even going back to what happened with Zanardi in Kart back in 2001, in terms of shoring
yeah,
up the cockpit sides and the aero screen. I think that this is the wreck that they had in mind when they
yeah,
when they started reinforcing and designing these modern generation cockpits.
yeah. So the Zanardi bar is what it was referred to, the extra carbon pieces that they put in the side of the cockpit. Then they had to reinforce the suspension mounts in the areas around the cockpit after Hinch had his accident.
Right.
And I don't remember, was Bourdais' accident, was that before or after that?
Bourdais' accident, I want to say that was after Hinch.
Okay, because Bourdais, when he hit the wall, he really smacked it, and I think because of that, they've got these extra, I want to say they're like pods that go inside the side pods, or at least they used to. They had them that bolted in or bolted onto the tub, that were basically there to take up the energy in that kind of accident where you hit the wall really hard, broadsided or something. And it added quite a bit of weight to the car, but I believe Bourdais was talking about in an interview how he was the cause of that.
Yeah.
Going forward. So with all those, and I'm sure we will keep moving forward with that, with the safety innovations, and that's really cool. And it's good to see that Piggott is walking away from that. He's going to be okay. So running back through the field, that was the incidents for the day. Really, there wasn't much going on, I felt, throughout the rest of the field. I mean, there was a decent amount going on, but the focus was really on the Sato Dixon angle. Pagenaud had a strong car for a while, but then he got himself kind of in trouble. Rinus VK made some mistakes he had the incident on pit road where I believe he hit crew members.
Yep. I think he I don't think it was a hard hit, but I think he almost pinned one up against the
wall.
The pit wall, yeah.
Yeah, so that kind of ruined his day. He finished back down in 20th, because he was really like the top Chevy for a while, and he was making some moves, holding off traffic, keeping up with it. So that was really cool to see. Really, the two disappointments of the day, I would say, in my book, were, they had to be, let me look at my list here. Marco, the fact that Dixon got the run on him and Marco didn't lead us was one of the big ones. That was unfortunate, because a lot of people were thinking maybe this is Marco's year, and he finished 13th. And that was truly unfortunate to see. And it is what it is. I don't know if he had that great of a race car, to be honest. They had a great car for qualifying, but maybe they missed. I think most of the Andretti cars really didn't have quite the race setup.
Right.
And then Alonso. Now, we didn't expect much from Alonso. I really didn't expect much from Alonso this year anyway.
Well, I heard that he had a clutch issue.
He had a clutch issue at the end, but he just really wasn't a factor at all in the race. So I was really hoping to see him maybe make the top 10, but that did not come to pass. Finished down at 21st, and this is his last 500 for at least 2 to 3 years, because Renault has stated that he will not be allowed to run the 500 as long as he's running for them in F1. So, unfortunate way to possibly finish at least this run, maybe finish his, run at the Triple Crown period. Hopefully not. I hope we get to see him back there. But the clutch issues, the Chevy issues, it is what it is, and unfortunately disappointing. It was good to see, your boy Pato up in
Yep.
sixth.
Yep. Rookie of the year.
Yep.
We've known that the Pato Award. I remember when I first saw him run at Sonoma. I want to say in 2018. He's one of those drivers that will get the most out of a situation. He um and will keep his wits about him. Which is good as a rookie. So he can only get better from here. But yeah, the Schmidt Peterson team. I might be a little bit biased, but the Arrow McLaren SP team, they've been solid. With these two new drivers, they've really been on top of it, and having consistent speed to run with some of the larger teams.
Yeah.
So it's good to see Pato. I think he's a rising star. Was Ferrucci is always surprises us with how quick he is. You know, because he's with the I want to say he's with the Vassar Sullivan,
Yeah, Dale Coyne
yeah,
team.
Dale Coyne, yeah,
Yeah, he's
um,
got Bourdais' old ride.
right. And
But
so
they will,
that's the little team that can, and
the Coyne record now, like if you look back, man, they've been at Indy. Last year Ferrucci, was last year Ferrucci's rookie season.
yep,
Um, he had a great run last year. Uh, and then a few years ago, Ed Jones stepped into Bourdais' ride after Bourdais had his crash in qualifying. Um, and that was the car because Coyne had very limited resources. They really had to piece everything back together. And I remember the rear wing of that car, they did not have one of the new Honda rear wings on. They ended up putting one of the DW12 wings on it.
wow,
But IndyCar okayed it because there was no performance advantage. That actually was a performance disadvantage because the wing was heavier and thicker versus the new ones. So they were running a real bastardized car there. But he ended up in third with that entry for Dale Coyne. So and I think they had a hole in the nose. He'd gotten into an incident and they didn't change the nose or the wing out, and he had a hole in the nose, so he had all that drag of the extra air conditioning there.
yeah,
So
yeah, because he was fast at the end of that race, but I think that extra drag definitely hampered him. Remember he
yeah,
talked about
yeah,
that if that hole hadn't been there, he thought he would have been part of that battle at the end.
yeah. But yeah, Dale Coyne has been definitely they've been knocking on the door of it. So I think I would like to believe at some point Dale Coyne's team could pull one off at Indy, and that'd be really cool considering how tiny they are. Um, Everyone used to joke that their driver was named TBA, to be announced.
Yeah.
So we'll see in the future who's driving for him. It may not be Santino. It may be Santino. Who knows? But it'd be neat to see Dale Coyne get one in. But fourth place for Santino was really strong. Third place for Graham. Looking at Graham, really didn't have a bad car all day. I don't know if it was quite as good as Sato's or Dixon's, but I think if they'd have run that race green, if there hadn't been an incident, I think Graham was going to catch and pass Dixon.
Yeah, the interesting thing about Graham is that, he has these bursts of ultra competitiveness, you know,
Yeah.
um, a couple of times a year. But when he's on, you
Yeah.
know. And I think he has a very specific feel for what he wants in the car. And when that lines
Yeah.
up with what he gets, then he kind of lights the world on fire. Hopefully he can catch that magic a couple more times this season and put it in victory lane. It'd be good to see him. Be good to see him win at Mid Ohio someday.
Yeah, it'd be neat to see him win at Mid Ohio. It'd be neat to see Jack Harvey and the Shank team, since they're based out of Mid Ohio. I remember when I ran the enduro races at Mid Ohio a couple of years ago, and I was sitting in one of the corners. Um, I guess it's been more than a couple of years ago. I was talking to one of the corner workers, and he said he was a big Michael Shank racing fan, um, because that was their home team, and it was really cool to see Shank's team there running. And that was probably not long after they won the 24 Hours of Daytona. Uh, you know, it would have been the Daytona prototypes. Um, so yeah, that was really cool talking to them. But everyone there would love to see Graham or one of the Shank guys win at Mid Ohio. Newgarden had a really strong showing up in fifth. It's the Chevys just, and going along with Pato, the Chevys just didn't have it this year. They really missed the boat on the power, I think. And Penske just had just a bad day, competitive wise. I would argue that this is one of their worst years since 1995.
95, yeah.
Their highest finishing car is fifth place, even though they were having some trouble there in the beginning, the end of the old Dallara, and the beginning of the DW12. So really, it took them, I think what was it, 2009 with Elio, and it took them until 2015 with Juan Pablo to win. And then it took them again until 2018 with Will to win, and then obviously they won back to back. But I'm sure Chevy will have it figured out for next year. This will not happen two times in a row. So, and it was kind of disappointing to see Elio back in 11th in his possible last 500. Definitely his last for Penske. So yeah, that's kind of the rundown on things. I mean, it was just it was really spectacular battle at the front. We had some big incidents throughout the race, or a lot of incidents throughout the race, and then everything kind of in the middle was just there. And I don't want to take away from the midfield battle, but it really was, the Scott Dixon show. Who's going to take him? Who's going to take him on? And then Sato rose to the occasion, and man, did he do it, and do it at the right time. And it was actually a really good race. Really enjoyed it. So it was just very, very different this year without the fans. So, yeah. Chris, you have anything to add to that?
Well, I'd say that we came away from this Indy 500 as good as, if not better than I think this is the best case scenario, for things being what they are. I say we just need to be thankful for that, and I think it'll make the next race, hopefully in May, hopefully with fans, all the more exciting. To be able to, it'll be a reunion in a way that it hasn't been before.
Exactly. I'm very thankful we got the race. And what was really odd feeling this year, because normally, the Indy 500 being in May, it's still very early on in the season, it seems like. And just like the Daytona 500 in NASCAR, where it takes place at the very beginning, or the 24 Hours of Daytona takes place in the beginning of the IMSA season, it really, you get the big race towards the beginning of the year, or at the beginning of the year, and then the rest of the season kind of falls off. And you get the championship battle, but it really tapers off in popularity. And it's like, well, this track's, you don't look forward to it as much as the Indy 500. This year, if there was anything to be said for this, is this coming at technically the back end of the season, because looking at the schedule now, we really only have, hopefully, 3 more tracks, maybe only 2 more tracks that we're going to go to. We have a doubleheader in St. Louis coming up this weekend. and then we have the doubleheader in October back at the Indy GP course for the Harvest Grand Prix. And then hopefully, even though it's not looking great right now with the way the pandemic's going, we get the Grand Prix of St. Petersburg end of October. But that's going to be the IndyCar season.
Oh, here's a bit of news. I don't know if you heard about the talks to have a Grand Prix in Nashville.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, they were going down there today to meet
Yep.
with the city officials to hold a street race in Nashville, Tennessee next year.
Yep.
So if that gets through, that'll be really cool because Nashville's really neat town. So yeah, it was really neat this year, at least with the Indy 500, because it feels like it's kind of wrapping everything up, even though it's kind of right in the middle if you think about it. 1, 2, 3, 6. We got 6 races before, and then 1, 2, 5 races after. So it really felt like it feels like it wraps everything up. And to me, after the race, I just got this kind of feeling of, we had the race. We actually had the darn race. Because it wasn't looking like it was going to happen there for a while, pretty early on. And then it got pushed back, and then they said no fans. And I was like, are they going to cancel it next? Like it felt like it. But we got it in, and I'm very happy for that. And it feels like a nice way to taper off the season. Even though we're going to get to St. Louis, and St. Louis, the Gateway race is going to be really fun. That's always pretty exciting. And we get 2. It's a double header. So
Oh yes.
And it's starts at 3 p.m. I believe the schedule says. So that's going to be an evening into night race. Here's something interesting. I'm looking at the schedule here for the Harvest GP races, and it says they're starting at 3:50 p.m. Eastern time. That's awfully late to be starting
in the fall, because even with Indianapolis being almost Central Time, in the fall without the lights, that's cutting it close.
Let me bear with me here for a second, folks. See what sundown is normally. Look at my chart. I can tell you from my location what times sunset is. Sunset's like 8:26 in my location. And this is August, mind you. It's just going to get earlier, and obviously sunset. When it starts to get dark, it gets dark early. But sunset right now at 8:26 in August. We're talking October, beginning of October, and they're starting at 3:50. Depending on how long the race is, they're going to be right there, right? I don't know. That's a late start.
I mean that shades of Surfers Paradise 1994. You know?
Yeah. Are we going to put headlights on the cars now? That'll be cool. Or the next big addition is Penske's, maybe he's going to announce that they're going to put lights in at the speedway.
Oh, I hate to be a traditionalist, but that's going to throw off the just the silhouette of the speedway.
Yeah, this late start for the Harvest GP. I don't know about that. We'll see. I do hope by that time we can have some fans back in the stands, because I myself might go to that race if we could have fans back in the stands, because I don't think there'd be that many people there anyway, and I love seeing the cars on the road course also. And I haven't been able to get to a race this year, obviously, so I would love to say, yeah, I made it to one. So, but yeah, and then we've got the Grand Prix of St. Petersburg, supposed to be end of October. We shall see. Florida's not exactly been the best place to be right now.
Yeah, honestly, I'm surprised that the NASCAR can still run at Daytona. But
yeah,
yeah,
Daytona, I think, it's one of those. Are they having fans there? I didn't see if they're gonna have fans there.
I want to say for the road course they had a handful of fans, not a lot. But I think I do remember seeing some people in the stands for the road course race.
Yeah, but for the upcoming night race, I don't know. But I think Daytona, after being at Daytona, it is backed up against Daytona, but for the most part, it's so self-contained. It's not like it's in the middle of a residential neighborhood. Everything's built up around Daytona to serve Daytona. It's not just a track that's plopped down in the middle of somebody's backyard like Indy is. So I could see them being able to do stuff at Daytona and being able to quarantine from the rest of the world. Indy is a lot tougher to do that. And St. Petersburg, with it being a street course, you can't.
No.
It's just impossible. So we shall see. And I know that with St. Petersburg and all the street courses, they really rely on sales. Like there's no one to come in and supplement their income like at some of these other tracks. Like they absolutely have to meet a number with ticket sales in order to break even or to keep a race there. So it's wishful thinking at this point. I think we'll see how it goes. I hope everything goes well, and I hope we get a hold of St. Petersburg's normally a fun race. Turn 1 at St. Petersburg is absolutely one of the craziest turns of the year.
Yeah. I think St. Pete, it's a good track to either start or end a season,
Yeah. It'll be wild if we get a finish up there. It'll be very wild. But I think that's about it for our Indy 500 special this week, folks. We kind of did the rundown of the race. We were originally going to do some cool bench racing and tell some cool stories, and we actually recorded some of that, and it kind of really went off the rails, and we only got parts of it, and there was just a lot going on. So do apologize for that, but we did our Indy 500 rundown, and next show, hopefully next week, we're going to start getting back to our normal topics again. And our next topic on the agenda that we want to tackle is what it's like to run for a backmarker team or be part of a backmarker team. The mindset that's required for that, the goals that you have. Backmarkers are often discounted as bad racers or bad teams, and a lot of times that's not the case. Sometimes it's the case, but a lot of times it is not the case. They have a completely different way of operating and a reason for operating. So we hope to take some time to tackle that topic and bring that show for you next week, and hopefully have some good news for you. We'll give you the rundown on stuff. Hopefully we'll have some more F1 news and stuff by then, maybe some sports car stuff. So as we always say in closing, keep it on all four wheels and keep on keeping on.
Yep.
So cue the cart noises. This has been Off Camber, the karting podcast. See you later, guys.